Hello and welcome to Band in a Box 2024 for Mac. This video is part of our bootcamp series of videos where we take a particular task in Band in a Box and show you how it's done, and also show off new features in the program along the way. So in this video I'm going to show you how to enter a song from scratch using the new chord progression builder, and then I'll use the new multi-picker library window to pick a style and to also try out a bunch of different types of tracks, and then I'll also be using the new tracks window as well. So I have a blank chord chart here in front of me, and I'd like to start working on a new song, and I have kind of a classic country song in mind. I currently have grow.sty loaded as the style, which is one of our new X Pro 6 styles. These X Pro styles are designed to work with the Pro version of Band in a Box, and also add a lot of real tracks and real drums for the Pro users. But these styles are also brand new for our Mega Pack and our Ultra Pack users as well. So for this song, I don't really know what the lyrics or anything will be yet, so for now I'll just call it My New Country Song. So I'm going to leave this song in the key of C, with the first chord being a C chord. But to continue along from here, I'm going to use the new chord progression builder, which can be opened either by control-clicking and selecting the chord builder, or by pressing Control-Shift-H. And then I can just click on the progression builder tab. So I want to start entering new chords at bar 2, and because Band in a Box 2024 now uses floating windows for a lot of these types of windows rather than modal windows, that means I can interact with the program even with this window open, which you couldn't do in the past. So if I want to start on bar 2, I can just click on bar 2, and in the dialog it's now showing the current bar here as bar 2, and the current chord is C. So there's currently no chord here in bar 2, but the last chord entered was here, and it was a C at bar 1. So in this dialog, the C chord is highlighted in black. That means that's the current chord, and then all of the suggested chords that would be good chords to come after it are highlighted with colored squares around them. The ones that are blue would be the most common chords to come after that chord, and then there's usually one or two interesting chords that are highlighted in orange. So these chords wouldn't be quite as common as the other ones to come after that first chord, but they often have a cool sound and can take you to new places when you're putting together a progression. So once I actually enter a chord here, it's no longer going to show me the best chords for this bar, it will show me the best next chord. So before I actually enter a chord here, I want to hear what the different chords it's suggesting will sound like. So I can shift-click on any of these chords to hear what they sound like without actually entering them in. And I generally like to hear the current chord first, so that I can then hear what the next chord will sound like coming after it. So I'll shift-click here on C, and then I'll try some of these others. Let me try out this interesting chord, D7. Yeah, that was kind of cool. Let me try C7 instead. Yeah, I think I'll enter that at bar 2. So you'll notice when I finally actually selected that, it changed all of the suggested chords in here. That's because even though we're still in this chord and entering a chord would enter it here, it's not actually now telling me what would be good chords in this cell. It's telling me what would be good chords coming after it. So I want to enter a chord now at bar 3. I'm just going to move this window down a bit so I can see the chords under it. And now again, because it's a floating window, I can click in bar 3 here. So you'll notice that now the list of chords it's suggesting is actually quite smaller than it was before. And the reason why is that C7 in the key of C pretty much wants to go up to F. And so F, F7, and even F over A would be good choices to come after that. G7 would also be good, but I think F is definitely a good choice for this bar here. So I'm just going to click F. Now, this is also a good time to kind of explain this dialogue a bit further. You'll notice that the top row here is labeled diatonic. That means that all of the chords up here only contain notes that are in the key of C. That is, all the notes in these chords are part of the C major scale. As such, this top row is kind of a safe one if you really want to stick to simple pop or simple country progressions. As we go down here, we then see that there are dominant seventh chords. These will often make your song sound bluesy, or they might sort of push you in a different direction. Like a C7 chord or an F7 chord will sound kind of bluesy. An E7 chord will kind of push you towards an A or A minor chord. Then there are slash chords, which in the case of these ones listed here, are common major and minor chords within the key, but with different bass notes. Parallel minor means that the chord has the same root as up here in the diatonic list here, but they're minor instead of major. I'll shift click again so that I can hear these chords without actually entering them in, but if I was to go F to F minor, you can hear that's a fairly common pop progression as well. Then we have diminished and half diminished chords. And at the very bottom here, we have the ability to enter any chords we want. So all 12 chromatic notes are down here, and if I click on one of these small buttons beside the root, it gives me a full list of all the chords with more common ones up here, but then there are also these submenus here where you can select things like D9, sharp 11, D7, flat 9, flat 13, etc. One other important thing to keep in mind is that if you've already entered some chords, like I've done here, if I click on a bar that already has chords in it, it's not going to show me the best chords for my current position. For example, if I click in bar 2 here, it's not showing me the best chords for this bar. I have to delete the chord first, then move out of this cell, and then back in, and now it's showing the best chords to come after this C chord. But I'll undo that by pressing Command-Z and continue on. So now I'm looking for a chord to come after this F chord. So again, I will shift click to hear what the F sounds like, and then maybe try G after that. Yeah, not bad. I'll see how going back to C sounds. Yeah, I think actually I'll go C there. And I think I'll let that C go for 2 full bars. So I'll find another chord now for bar 7. So again, I'll listen to the previous chord, and then maybe a G after it. Yeah, I think I'll go G there. And actually, it's showing G7 as a good chord to come after G, so maybe in bar 8, I'll go G7. So rather than continuing on here at bar 9, I think I'd actually like to just repeat some of this, so I will go Command-C to copy this, and then Command-V to paste it. And then maybe I'll try and find a good chord for bar 14. Again, shift-click on C to hear that, and then, yeah, I'll go G, and then maybe back to C. Oh, and actually now I see that after C here, a good chord would be C7. So maybe at bar 16, I will go to C7. Now, like we saw up here at bar 2, when you have a C7 chord, it kind of really wants to go to F here. Again, there are a couple of other options here, but I will go to F here at bar 17. And I think I'll actually change it to a B part marker. That means it actually changes from an A substyle to a B substyle. So the drums will likely change what they're playing. Some of the other instruments as well might change the way they're playing too. So it's like as if the musicians are switching from a verse to a chorus or a bridge, that kind of thing. Although I was just remembering, as I mentioned earlier, the chords in the dominant area here can often make it sound a little bluesy. So maybe for this section, instead of an F, I'll play an F7 here to give it a bit of a bluesy bridge. And I'll let that go for 2 bars. So maybe at bar 19, back to a C. And maybe I'll just do the same thing again at 21 here. So some possible chords for here: C, D minor, G, G7, and for an interesting chord option, it gave me A flat. So I'm going to shift click to see how that sounds. Now, I think having an interesting chord like that might take it out of the classic country vein, but maybe having a slightly more modern twist just in this little part, that might be a bit of a neat juxtaposition here. So I think I actually will pick that. So now I will just move this out of the way once more. And I think for the last 8 bars, maybe I will just copy these and paste them. All right, so now I think I'm ready to hear how this song sounds. Actually, I think I'm going to skip ahead to bar 17 here, just because I'm interested to hear how this A flat chord is going to sound there. And now we're going to look at another major new feature, the new Multi-Picker Library Window, or just Multi-Picker for short. This floating window is a one-stop shop to pick styles or individual tracks from any of the 8 track types: real tracks, real drums, loops, user tracks, MIDI super tracks, custom MIDI tracks, MIDI soloists, and melodists. All of the pickers show a common interface with a similar look and function, with filters for searching to find exactly what you need for your song. It allows selection and generation of the whole or partial track. Demos, memos, and multi-column information are available for all of them. There are a couple of ways to get into the multi-picker. There's a new multi-picker button. F7 is a quick and easy shortcut. And you can also just type in, as if you were typing a chord, M, enter. Now you can see up at the top there are individual tabs for all the different track types, but at the end I currently have the Styles tab selected. And I'm going to keep that selected because I want to first find a good style for this song that I just created. This is meant to be an old school country song, so I want to find a style like that for this. You can see that there are currently over 10,000 styles to choose from in this list, so I'm going to have to do something here to narrow this down to find exactly the style that I want for this song. So the familiar song title feature is something that has been in the style picker previously, and I'm going to use that right now here. As I was entering this song, I kind of had something like Your Cheatin' Heart in mind. The chords are different, and I don't want it to be exactly like that, but that's kind of the type of song that I had in mind as I was entering that song. So here, I'm just going to type Your Cheatin'. There we go, and I don't even have to type any further. It's giving me 3 different versions of the same song, so I'll pick this Hank Williams one here, and I'll double click on it. You can see that it's automatically entered filters here based on that song. So we can see it's entered filters for country, 4/4 time signature, swing 8's groove, near 130 beats per minute. And now that it's entered that for me, I can actually fine-tune these filters as well if I have some other things in mind. For example, country is a very broad category within Band in a Box that also includes similar genres that might not technically be country, like folk styles, bluegrass, etc. I want to get more specific, so you can see here where it says everything country, there are also some more options, and I think I'd just like to pick country classic. And after I finished entering that song, the tempo ended up being 115 beats per minute, and I actually kind of liked it there. I don't really want it to be much faster than that, so I'm going to change the tempo in the filter here to 115. You can see for the styles in the list, this column shows the ideal tempo for the style, but all of our styles work well over a fairly wide tempo range, maybe 15% lower than the ideal tempo, and maybe up to 30% higher than the ideal. So with these in the list, some have ideal tempos of 110, 115, 120, and all of them would be perfect for my song. And so now you can see that that list that was previously over 10,000 styles has now been narrowed down to show only 226 styles. That's still a lot for classic country at a specific tempo and a specific groove, but that at least makes it a little easier for me to kind of narrow it down. So now I want to sample these styles and find one that I want to use for the song. And not only do I want to hear what the styles sound like, I want to hear what they sound like on my song. So we'll go to Options here, and then I'll go to Set Dialogue Options. So here I'm going to set this to play a preview when auditioning. What that means is that when I sample these styles, instead of playing a pre-made demo, it's actually going to generate all the tracks over my chord progression. And I also want to have it set so that I can just double-click on the styles in the list and it will play my chords. I could also allow it to change the tempo to the ideal tempo for the style, but as I pointed out before, the filters I added made it so that all of the styles in the list will work perfectly for my song. So I'll leave that off, and so I'll press OK. One final thing I'd like to do is sort this list by date, because I'd like to have the most recent styles at the top so I can check out some of our new reel tracks. And when I start sampling these, I'll also be demonstrating another great new feature where generations and renders are now way faster. I'm also going to move the multi-picker out of the way here so that I can see the chords being played in my chord chart as I sample these different styles. So I'll just start double-clicking on a few of these to hear what they sound like. And this one actually sounds exactly like what I was after for this song, so I'm going to keep that style. So now I'm going to explore the multi-picker a bit more. The Styles tab, as I mentioned, was for picking full bands with multiple instruments. All of the other tabs in the multi-picker are more geared for picking individual instruments. As such, you'll notice that they all have a slightly different layout from the Styles tab, but then that layout is mostly consistent for all of these tracks tabs. You'll see the track window up here where you can select the track you want to use to select individual instruments. And as I mentioned before, this is a floating window, unlike the old Reel Tracks Picker, Reel Drums Picker, etc. This means you can interact with the other elements of the program while the window is still open. For example, as I click on the different labels in the mixer, that also selects those tracks in here. Now, as I mentioned, the Styles tab had a slightly different function than all the other tabs and therefore has slightly different filters. So the filters I entered in that dialog aren't carried over to these tabs, but I can easily enter similar filters in here. Another new feature is that the song titles filter we saw earlier can now also be used in these individual instrument pickers too, so I'll do the same thing. And like before, I could fine-tune these filters. And now, since all of the individual tracks tabs are quite similar, you can see that now if I switch to these other track types, it actually has carried over the same filters to them. And also similar to the Styles tab, I can have double-clicking or spacebar play my chords rather than the pre-made demos. So for example, I could select the bass track, add another little filter to just show basses, and then I could try out some different basses over this. I think I'll stick to the one that was set in the style. Now this particular bass is actually 2 real tracks in one. The A-B means that for the A section it's using this country swing in 2 real track. And then at B it changes to this completely different real track playing a walking bass line. But another thing you can do right here in the multi-picker is do partial regeneration. And it doesn't need to be the same real track as what's already on the track. If I want the bass to start walking 2 bars earlier, even though it's still part of the A section, I can just highlight these 2 bars in this chord sheet. Again, easy to do because this is a floating window. And then click on Partial Generation, where it is now populated here by the bars that I highlighted up here. So I can regenerate this range. And if I wanted a different generation, I could just try that again. This partial regeneration can also be done from the Tracks window, which has been added with Band in a Box 2024. The last 8 bars before the end is again set to A substyle, which you can see in the timeline here. If I play a bit, you can hear and see that the bass is playing in 2, that is, playing only on beats 1 and 3 of the bar. I'll do the same thing here, partially regenerate this so it walks in those last 2 bars. But the benefit of doing it here in the Tracks window is that I can actually be more precise. Rather than having to use exact bar lines for the regeneration, like I did in the chord chart, I can regenerate whatever range I like. For example, I could have it start halfway through bar 31. And again, I'll press Partial Regeneration, and we can see that now it's giving me a more precise range here because that's what I entered in the Tracks window. There are also additional settings in each of these Tracks tabs specific to those track types. For example, I could make this bass simple, which would make it avoid material within the style that might be a bit more busy. There are similar settings for real drums, but again, specific to real drums. So for example, there's always a fill at bars before a part marker, but say for example, I want to regenerate a bar that comes before a part marker and I don't want it to include a fill. Well, I can select this. And right now there is a fill at bar 8 because bar 9 is the start of a new section. You can see there's an A part marker there. So I'll play what's there right now on the drums. And so I'll highlight this area. And again, I'll select Partial Generation. I'll regenerate this range. And now there's no fill there. You can now set favorites for any track type. You previously could set favorites for real tracks and real drums, but now you can set favorites for all tracks, for example, loops. I'm now going to take a look at the Midi tracks. There are now over 800 Midi tracks you can use in the same way you use real tracks, real drums, Midi super tracks. These are individual tracks from our huge collection of Midi styles, with this feature enabling to use those individual tracks from those styles in whatever song you're working on. Now I still have the same filters loaded, so that 800 has been narrowed down to these 30 items. And I'd like to actually add a piano, so I'll also add a filter here for that. And so that's now giving me these 8 items here. Now I'll pick an unused track. The next one down from the tracks I've been using so far is the melody track. So I'll click on that to select it. And I'll also make sure I have it set so that I can double click or space bar to play my chords rather than the pre-made demo, which I do have selected. And now I'll try out a few options here. This one I think is a little too busy. That's not what I had in mind. That one's not quite right either, I think. And this one I think is perfect. I wanted something simple, classic, and I think that fits the bill. Now, there are other track types that I haven't looked at yet that are also included in this multi-picker. The Midi soloist tab uses a very old feature in Band-in-a-Box that existed before even real tracks or real drums were introduced and everything was Midi in Band-in-a-Box. But this older feature is now so much easier to use since it's been added to the multi-picker. I've cleared the previous filters to show the total number of Midi soloists available, 341. And I'll add back just a couple more filters. Country, 4/4, swing eighths. Now, what I had in mind for the soloist here is that I wouldn't generate a whole track, but maybe just pick 8 bars or so on this piano track that I just created, and just use partial generation to have it switch to a solo at that point. As such, as I sample these, I don't think I actually want them to be written on the track, I just want to hear a pre-made demo. So for now, I'll actually remove the check from double-click Plays Chord Sheet. So now I'll just click on a few of these to hear a pre-made sample, and I'll pick one that I think might work well. I think I want to try this one, Country Swing Piano. Now, the soloist has in the past typically been used on a designated soloist track. But I want this to actually occur on the same piano track I just added. So I'm going to remove the check here that forces it to the designated soloist track. So that means it can go right on this piano track. I'm going to move this dialog out of the way here. So I'll click where I want it to start around bar 17, and then I'll zoom out, and I'll shift click just a little past bar 25. So now, like before, I can go to partial generation, The Melodist is similar to the soloist in that it can generate melodic lines to chord progressions, just focusing more on melodies rather than typical soloing lines. The kind of thing that could potentially be actually sung with lyrics, and also using musical thematic material through a whole piece rather than just soloing over changes. In addition, it can also create chord progressions, so basically it can create a song from scratch, including a title. Now again, like in the soloist dialog, a new feature is that you can hear samples of these melodists by double-clicking on them. You know what? I'm actually going to try that one there and see how it sounds. So before I generate this, I'm going to go into the settings here and I'm going to not generate chords. And also not generate title or intro. And I won't let it change the style. So basically, I just want to have it generate a melody here. So now I have to choose a track. I already used the melody track for that piano plus the soloist there, so I'm going to remove the check here, and I'm just going to go to the next track down, which happens to be called the soloist track, but I'm going to put a melody on here. So I'll generate now. Now, before I let it continue further, I just actually want to do a couple things first. First of all, I want to delete the melody in that portion where the other track is soloing. So that was at bar 17. So I'll just highlight the notes in here between 17 and 24. And the other thing I think I want to do here is use a different instrument. I'd like to add one of our new playable reel tracks, and you can access those in the HiQ Patch plugin menu item here. These playable reel tracks are great to use even when they're not in conjunction with reel tracks. So I want to use an electric guitar sound, so I'll filter by electric guitar. Now that still leaves over 600 sounds here, but I was thinking maybe something with tremolo. And it looks like there's actually some baritone guitars that have tremolo sounds. All of these playable reel tracks have corresponding audio demos, so I'm just going to listen to the demo for this one here. First of all, it plays the instrument by itself, and then further along, it plays it in the context of a band. So yeah, I think I like that one. I'm going to pick that one. So let's hear how that's sounding. Okay, so first of all, I want to select all of these and lower them by at least an octave. Probably 2 octaves actually would be good. And I also think it might be nicer if the melody was more legato. So it's actually a good thing that I did put this on the soloist track, because despite the all tracks are equal thing, the melody and soloists actually do have some extra features available to them, such as add legato staccato to soloist. And I'll allow for an increase of up to a full bar, 480 ticks. And each note can go right up to where the next note starts. So you can see that now has increased the length of all of the notes here. So now let's hear how that sounds. There's one final feature I'd like to show you, and that's the remembered style name feature. If you recall, at the beginning of this video, I had grow.sty loaded as the style, and I saved the song with that style before I changed it to classic.sty. In the multi-picker, a new feature is that that style is remembered by going into Options, Revert to Remembered Style Name. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope it helps you out as you're learning the new features in Banana Box 2024 for Mac. Thanks for watching, and have fun!